Welcome to the next episode of the GSD Golf Podcast. I'm your host, AT, and we have a very special guest on this episode 3 of season 3 of the GSD Golf Podcast. We have none other than the host of Wicked Smart Golf Podcast. We have the author of Wicked Smart Golf 2. He's a +2 handicap. He's a golf writer. He knows all the things when it comes to lowering your score, playing better golf, especially when it comes to junior golfers. Please welcome to the show, Michael Leonard. Michael, welcome to the GSD Golf Podcast. Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I love the hype music. Feeling ready to go.
So, Michael, you're a 2-time author, Wicked Smart Golf 2. I want to jump in real quick and say, where can people get their hands on this book, and how can they learn how to break 80 more consistently?
Yeah, so the first book's more like breaking 90 and kind of just getting the introduction to the mental game. And then the second one's all about breaking 80 and actually becoming a scratch golfer. And they're both available on Amazon and Audible. The Audible just came out for the second one. And so the first one, I think, is good for people that just kind of need that introduction into it. There's 111 ways to play better without swing changes. Second book is a lot more in-depth and a lot more strategies for the really avid golfers that are trying to shoot in the 70s. But yeah, Amazon, Audible, and the Audibles have a little bit more bonus content as well.
And Michael, you play golf. You're a +2 handicap. You've definitely come up with some strategies, some ways of preparing for golf tournaments. Talk to us a little bit about for junior golfers that are getting ready for a tournament. What are some of the things they need to work on, 5 to 7 days ahead of time, and then a day before they get ready to play?
Yeah, I'd say the first thing just to work on is to not overdo it. I think a lot of times when I look back on my early tournaments, I would just try and play and practice way too much, and then I'd be exhausted by the time I got there. And so we have to remember that golf requires physical and mental energy as well, especially tournament golf. And we don't want to mentally grind too much out there and really wear ourselves down physically. We don't want to hit too many balls. I don't know if you can really overdo putting or chipping if you really need to put in the work, but I think that more isn't always better. So I think maybe heading into 5 to 7 days, you want to make sure to still obviously working on your swing and stuff and just refining it. That's the time for me where I just do switch to a lot of routine work. So I will spend a ton of time just going through my full pre-shot routine. So instead of getting like a large bucket, I might get a medium or small. And after a quick warm up, I will just be super intentional and go through my routine, like, my steps behind the ball, walking in, timing it, just trying to get really comfortable, because that is your best resource out there. Your routine's kind of like your caddy when you're on the course, and you obviously need to be able to block out the nerves that you're going to feel and make sure you're 100% committed. So make sure you're practicing that routine off the course, so that way when you show up, it's hopefully going to be there for you. And then the day before, I think it can, for me, I have a tournament coming up this weekend. The day before, I'm actually taking 100% off, just get my mind right, do maybe a little extra meditation. I do like a brain dump and like a journal or an audio note sometimes, just to like kind of clear up anything I'm feeling. I want to clear up as much space as I can to really just like not have any lingering doubts, or, sometimes we just have maybe you're not hitting as good, so you're feeling like you're not prepared. Sometimes you're hitting it too good. So, we're kind of an interesting sport in that the mindset does play such a big role in it, because it is you out there for 4 to 6 hours sometimes. So I like to just get my mind and body right as much as I can. But yeah, I would really stay away from like trying to hit 1,000 balls the day before the tournament.
So right before we get into the actual tournament, let's talk about 2 things there. One, it was really interesting what you just said, the routine, because I think the routine comes with you. Well, 3 things. I think the routine comes with you, right? That has to be your fallback during a round when you need to get right, so to speak. Having that routine has got to be key, right?
Yeah, it's a huge part of my second book too, because to me, after interviewing hundreds of guests and studying just really good players and being in the game almost 30 years, which is really aging me. And because I didn't start when I was Tiger's age. And so I think that the routines are the only thing I can find that all players have in common. They all have different routines. Some take longer, some take shorter, some take 4 looks at the target, which you don't need to. Some take 1 look. Some players take no practice strokes on the green. Some players take them behind. There's just like a lot of different ways to do it, but they all have something. And so that's why I stress it so much in my content, because again, I want to study what great players do. and they all show up ready to go. They all have their warm-up routines, but then they have their full shot routine. They have a short game routine, and they have a putting routine. So like, for me, for example, I have the tournament coming up. Like what I'll do some days, I'll just do 90-minute practice session, like maybe 4 or 5 days in advance. And I'll do 30 minutes full swing, going through my routine at the range, 30 minutes doing my short game routine, 30 minutes doing my putting routine. I'm not using training aids. I'm not trying to get technical. I'm just trying to get as comfortable and consistent as I can, because I know that when I get out there, maybe I'm feeling the nerves or excitement, maybe I'm in the lead, or maybe I'm, worried about making a cut, I'm going to have to go back to my routine. That's like your fallback. Dr. Bob Rotella always said your routine is your wingman on the course, but you have to work with your wingman a little off the course for him to show up and help you out. So I think that that's one thing that every golfer can do. And I think a lot of players have them for their full swing, but I really challenge players, especially with putting, to make sure it's dialed. And then short game too. I think that the more consistent you can make it, and you just say, if I asked you right now as a player, what's your short game routine look like? I want to know where you take your practice swings. Do you walk up to the green? Do you pick a landing spot? What's the timing look like? Have you ever recorded it? So I think the more granular you can get on that, the more consistent you can get, you're going to see better results. And I think the routine for every type of golfer leads to the one thing everyone wants, which is consistency. Because if your mental process is better, you're going to walk into the shot more prepared. You're not going to hit as many bad shots. You're going to hit probably a little tighter shot dispersion, because you're going to be more committed. And then hopefully you're not
good.
Those blow up holes that nobody wants.
Nobody wants the blow up holes. So before we get to the tournament, you have a practice round. Talk to us about your thoughts on the practice round, how to play the practice round. You and I talked before, and you talked a little bit about not taking it as seriously, not keeping score. But what are the benefits of getting that practice round? And maybe you don't get to play. I've seen situations where maybe you don't get to play all 18, but you're kind of, to your point of the short game, you're kind of finding it 100 yards and in. You're going to hit a couple shots there. You make a couple putts. What are the benefits there?
Yeah, for me personally, I do not keep score when I'm playing practice rounds. It's again called a practice round, not a tournament round. And like I said, I think that you have to have as much mental energy as you can going into a tournament. So if I'm grinding over 2-3 footers and going through my routine on every single shot out there, like that's just going to wear that battery down a little bit. And especially if you have 2-3 or maybe a 4-day event coming up, that's now a whole nother 18 holes and wear and tear, and on the mental side too. So I like to just go out there and get really comfortable with my tee shots. I really try to spend a lot of time hitting driver on every hole, so that way I can always dial it back. I learned that from a coach, because you might hit hybrid, but then you're like, when you're in a tournament, like I wonder where driver would end up, but then you're kind of not committed, and now all of a sudden you're not going to swing with that same level of self-belief of where the ball could actually end up. So I like to hit driver. You can always dial it back. And then I like to spend a lot of time on short game. So I want to see, actually with approach shots too, I want to see how the ball hits and reacts. Does it hit and jump forward? Does it hit and spin back? Where are the false fronts at? Where should I really avoid? So I write a lot of notes down in yardage books and notes on my phone. And then when I'm around the greens, I check out the bunkers. So I'll throw some balls in there, hit some shots just to see what the sand's going to look like on the course. A lot of places don't even have practice bunkers. So I like to hit some shots there. And then a lot of chipping and putting, right? So you have to remember, most times in tournaments, the pins are going to be tucked or in some weird spots sometimes. So I will look if they have them marked already. If you're playing the day before, the association might already put some dots out there and try and chip and putt to that. If not, just think, hey.
That's such a key right there, what you just said. I think sometimes we learn this. I think it was late last year, maybe the year before, we learned that if you actually look on the green, you're going to see a red or white dot, right? That's usually telling you where the hole's going to be the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And you just want to think about, that's not like you're not going to necessarily be good enough to hit that shot the next day and be like, oh, this is the putt I'm going to have. Like in a perfect world, sure, but golf is far from perfect. So at least wow, that's a front left pin. If you're left of that, it's going to hit that hill and roll 10 yards down. Or wow, that left bunker is short-sided. That's a no-go. So you really want to just start to use that as a strategy for putting that all together. So once I do my practice round, then at night I will go home. I use Decade Golf, so I really geek out on like Google Earth. Like I did that this morning for my tournament, like measured the width of the fairways, got really clear about every club I'm going to hit, what side of the tee box I'm going to play from. So I want to have all that prep work done ahead of time. So that way, when I get on the course, I rely on logic instead of emotion, because a lot of times, you think, hey, I'm going to lay up on this hole. I know it's the club. If I hit driver, I'm not going to carry the water 9 out of 10 times. It's going to be a stupid shot. But then all of a sudden you have a double bogey or a 3-putt the hole before. And then you're like, well, maybe I could get that. And you're relying on emotion instead of logic. And then all of a
trying
sudden
to make up the shots because you're
try
just
to make up the shots. You just made double. Now you make another double. Now you could ruin the whole round, and you can eliminate a lot of that by doing your homework ahead of the time and just having a game plan. Like, you don't have to geek out quite as much as me, but you just having, hey, I know on this hole I'm going to hit this club. Obviously wind and weather can change it, but having a game plan, I think, is key, because then you just show up and it's less thinking, so you can conserve that mental energy and hopefully have it better and more of it later in the round.
GSD Golf Community. We are on with Michael Leonard, golfer, mental coach, author. Michael, if someone's looking to get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about the mental side of the game, how can they reach out?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email, michael@wickedsmartgolf.com. All my handles are just at Wicked Smart Golf, YouTube, podcast, everything is just titled Wicked Smart Golf. So make it pretty easy. Do
you have any connection to Boston, New England with the Wicket?
Yes, I'm just a huge Boston movie fan. I'm from Oregon, but I start every episode off with my Boston accent because I can throw it out real quick. I can be from Boston. So I just watch way too much Ben Affleck movies and Matt Damon and all those guys, and I just love those movies. And so I always wanted to start a brand based on better golf without swing changes, and mental part obviously is a big component of it. And for some, I wish I could remember the exact day that thought came to me. I want to say it was sometime in 2019 or 2020, and I sat on the idea for a couple of years before finally doing it. But yeah, that's where it comes from. So I have I have a decent Boston following, though. They enjoy the name.
It's a dead giveaway. When I saw it, I was like, this guy has to be from the Northeast.
I'm not. I know I let everybody down, but I do. I can, couple of cocktails, I can be in the Boston accent all day, though.
So talk to us a little bit. We talked about the mental side of things, and one of the things that I have witnessed, I want to get into the mental side during the tournament now. But we've seen, you talked about prior to a tournament, not hitting a large bucket of balls, hitting a small bucket of balls. I have seen, as I people watch during these things, I've seen kids and parents of junior golfers take things down a road that it doesn't need to go down because maybe they're not hitting their A shot on the range before the day of the tournament. Should they be worried that maybe they're not hitting perfect shots on the range when they're loosening up, trying to get the body warm? Or is that just something they need to figure out okay, this is the type of shot, this is the type of swing I'm going to have today, and how do I navigate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like parents and players can just get way too focused on results. Like you're already a solid player, and one bad warm up or mediocre warm up doesn't mean you need to work on your swing. And I think that I always tell players, stay away from the training aids the day of the tournament, stay away from recording your swing, and you're going down too technical oriented. Personally, I mean, Rory was seen using a training aid the day of a tournament. If you're Rory level, have at it.
Rory McIlroy, it's a little bit different, right?
Exactly. So for me, I mean, I play in a lot of USG events. I'll get paired up with a 16-year-old and, his dad, and they'll be, caddying, and I'll see him on the range, recording his swing and getting down. I love the commitment, but for me, feel like that is just way too technical and conscious mind thinking. You've already trained for hours, weeks, months, years, decades to get a good golf swing, to get a good, flow and understand what you need to do to play your best golf. But if you're out there before the round and you're thinking about P2 and P4 and this and that, it's so exhausting to me. So I want players to just go out there and remember, it's a warm up. It's not a practice session. And so it doesn't matter. I've had some of my best tournament rounds after horrible warm-ups. Vice versa, I've hit it great on the range and played terrible. There's one thing doesn't correlate to another. Sometimes you will hit great on the range and it'll transfer the course. Those are unicorns, though. They don't happen a lot. So for me, I do not think you need to worry about it. And again, just focus on your process, focus on getting your body warmed up and loose. And it really does not dictate how the round's going to go unless you let it.
And so what are some practical tips that our junior golfers can leverage so that they can lower their scores when they're out there during a tournament?
I'd say the first thing is just to watch the self-talk. Not even juniors, but every player can really say some negative things to themselves way too
We do
often.
it all the time as adults. I mean, I know we do it. I mean, I'm sure you
if we hung out, you wouldn't, but I honestly have because I started doing this 6-7 years ago, and if I just don't say anything negative to myself, I might get frustrated if a client does something, or if I have this issue in my business, or I hit a bad shot or play bad in a tournament. I might get frustrated, but I never say anything negative to myself. And so, I always challenge people, if you wouldn't say it to a playing partner, don't say it to yourself, because junior golfers specifically are out there. I suck. I can't believe I did that. And I think a lot of it is ego, and we want to show everyone that we're a good player. And so if I externalize, oh, I never hit that shot, oh, I suck today, or, it shows you somehow care more, and people are like, oh, that makes sense because he cares a lot. That's not setting you up to win. And again, I had to learn this the hard way. I had horrible body language. My parents always joked they could tell how I was doing when they would walk up from a hole ahead. They'd be like, oh, Mike's having a bad day. Mike's having a good day. And so challenge yourself to make your body language and self-talk so good that it doesn't matter if you're 5 under or 7 over, it's going to be the same. It's not easy to do in the beginning, but it starts by monitoring it. But self-talk to me is the easiest thing to start playing better, because it just sets you up to win. It has a direct correlation with your attitude, your feelings. And I had a player I was playing with last year. He was like 20 years old, good player, started the day off terrible, just not even terrible, just making a lot of bogeys, but he's beating himself up, just so negative. And on like the 11th hole, he was through, I think he was 7 over at that time. And I told him a little bit about my business and what I do. And he's like, well, what would you recommend if I was a client? I'm like, look, I don't try and give advice. He's like, no, seriously. I was like, one thing, it's all I would tell you. Just stop saying negative things to yourself. I was like, you are beating yourself up like it's going to make you play better. He's like, okay. And he took it to heart. And the rest of the day, he didn't say one negative thing. And we were riding together. So I was on him too. Yep. And he ends up playing and he shot even the rest of the day. I was like, great. You saw the immediate improvement. He's more fun to be around as well. And he played better.
Right.
But the next day he comes out and birdies 5 of the first 6 holes, shoots a 30 on the front 9, and ends up shooting 66 for the round. Lowest round of the day in the whole tournament, and or maybe second lowest, and the lowest round of his life ever in a tournament. And he's like, thanks so much. And I'm like, you didn't do anything different. You didn't do any swing warm up different. You just stopped talking negative things to yourself. And I'm not saying you can, just all of a sudden, if you change your self-talk, you're going to play perfect, but it sets you up. It gives you in the right mindset. And so that's why, again, you just have to start monitoring it though. Most players have no idea how negative they are. And how do they
learn to be, how do I'm going to say, how do we as golfers, amateur golfers, junior golfers, the pros, we've heard this, the Jordan Spieths, the Justin Thomas of the world, they have their outbursts too. Like, is that a learned behavior? Like, do we see something? Like,
it's a habit. It's just a habit, right? Okay. And you can change your habits. If they're habits you've been doing for 10 years, it's going to be a harder habit to change. But at the same time, you can change any one of those habits. So it starts by recognizing the habit. What is the habit I want to change? What's the habit that is ruining my game and getting me out of that flow state where I'm going to play my best golf? So I think self-talk is one of the easiest ones to change, because you can literally hear it. And if your parent is riding with you, or someone is near you and they can hear the negative things, it starts by just tracking it. Like I had a student last year that I was working with. He said, he's like, yeah, I'm constantly beating myself up out there. I was like, well, how many times do you think you say it? Like once a hole, once a 9, what are we talking about? And he's like, I never really thought about it. I was like, well, next time you go out, let's log every time you say something negative about yourself or your game out loud, or even under your breath. Same thing. Your mind is hearing it all. And he's like 31 times. I was like, that's a lot. Like that's almost twice a hole. Yeah. Next time it went to 25. Then all of a sudden, after like a couple months, it went down to like less than 5. And he's like, I'm having more fun. I'm better to be around, and I'm playing better. So it starts by tracking it. Like literally you have your score. If you want to do your stats on the scorecard, and then just a little X, that hole I hit.
It's almost like you're keeping a mental scorecard also.
100%. Yeah, there's a bunch of different resources and ways to keep mental scorecards, but that's an easy one. Start tracking your habits. If you don't like any habit in your life, start tracking it. So that way, when you can manage it or measure it, then you can manage it and hopefully change it. But it starts by becoming aware, and you have to realize that is kind of the first step.
And so we've talked about before the tournament, we've talked about the warm up, we've talked about the mental side of the self-talk. Course management is hugely important in lowering your scores. Talk to us about ways that junior golfers and even the parents of junior golfers can help themselves when it comes to course management. Because I got to tell you, I see some kids out there on the course, we walk, and I stay a little bit further ahead, but you see some kids make decisions like you would think they're Rory McIlroy or Scotty Scheffler or somebody, because they're trying to go between 2 trees. There's a gap this big, and course management has got to be hugely important to this process.
Yeah, there's a lot of different elements to course management, and it's one of those things though. I think it's an extension of the mental game. So if you're in a better mental state, and like for example, if you're not getting super angry or like throwing a club or pouting or saying negative things to yourself, your mind's going to be in a better place to make a more logical decision. Like you said, blow up holes are one of the things. I don't care what age you are, what skill level you are. Every single person, I might just write a book on blow up holes. Like there's that's like a huge chapter in my book is how to avoid them, and then inevitably when they happen, what to do to get out of them. But I think like blow up holes, like if you can't hit that shot 9 out of 10 times in practice, don't even think about it. And I think that it all comes down to avoiding those double bogeys or worse. So when you're out of position, which is going to happen, like that's why I stress stats a lot in my books and podcasts, because most players just think they're always going to hit these great shots. They're just so ingrained to watching golf on TV. They never miss a fairway. Those guys never miss a green. They make every putt. And then you just think, wow, I suck. I'm never going to make that good. That's the highlight reel. We need ESPN 8, the Ocho, to cover the low lights. I want to see the bad shots, the average shots, because that like put it on YouTube. It's not going to cost them anything, because that shows that most golfers that you're watching are the best golfers, their best weeks of the year. I mean, obviously Scotty Scheffler is like a robot, but other than that, like if you're seeing this no-name guy that you've never seen before, he's having the week of his life. He is statistically beating all of his normal shots in terms of distance, proximity, holes, or putts made. Like they're going against the odds. So having that understanding, like the PGA Tour, 55% fairways, 66% greens. So when you miss a fairway, stop beating yourself up and being like, oh, I don't need to try and make birdie here. I need to just try and hopefully make bogey or better. So that's like something I always say, like, when you're out of position off the tee and like you might have to chip out, or like, you're trying to avoid the hero shot, I always just switch the frame to how can I make bogey or better? Because a bogey's not going to end your momentum, and you can't measure momentum, but man, there's nothing like plotting your way around. You're feeling good. You're making some pars, maybe a putt drops. Now you're making a birdie. Yep. And then all of a sudden you make a triple and the momentum is lost. You're feeling like you have to question everything. And so if I can just make bogey, it's like, oh, no worries. I can birdie, and that wipes it.
You can get that momentum back, right?
Mm-hmm. So I always think that that's key in terms of course management, is how can I make bogey or better, and understanding if you can just keep it to bogeys or better, you're going to be way ahead of most players. And then the other thing is understanding like the middle of the green doesn't move. Like there's a lot more, you can use decade golf and get really statistical, which I love. But I mean, for junior golfers, like I remember in high school, we had days where the coach would just remove the flag from 9. And we always played better when we didn't know where the flag was, because we had to aim towards the middle of the green, because everyone forgets that you have a shot dispersion pattern in golf. You're going to hit some pulls, you're going to hit some pushes, you're going to hit some thin shots, you're going to hit them long and left, you're going to hit them short and right. But if we just always aim at the flag all the time, then you're going to short side yourself. And when you short side yourself, you might end up in the sand, and amateurs are not good in the sand. No matter how good you get, amateurs
no matter how much they practice
are not good. It's just not a skill that we are great at, And so all of a sudden now you're increasing your scoring average because you tried to attack the flag. So I think that anytime you're like outside 150 yards, like probably even outside 120, middle of the green, because you're going to pull some and they might end up right next to the flag. Maybe you push it and you're still on the green though. Like you're just giving yourself more opportunities. So I would say stay away from the hero golf, that lead to double bogeys, and just favor that middle of the green, and understand that no matter how good you get, you're going to miss some left, you're going to miss some right. Like I remember I was playing in a tournament last year, and I was playing really good. And I was like, I think if I make, I was very well aware of the leaderboard, because a guy told me. I wasn't looking at it, but he's like, oh,
you didn't ask. Somebody
yeah, I used to.
That's like, yeah, you're throwing a no-hitter. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And so, like, I remember I was the 18th hole, and at that time I was playing, I had a pretty consistent fade. The pin was on the right side. It was 5 from the right. And I was like, oh, this is, like, part of me, like 1% was like, oh, let's hit it right at the flag, kind of draw or fade it in. It's going to be all over it. And I said, no, you could miss that right. Now you're in that bunker, and that's an awful spot to be. So I was like, let's aim. I used the decade principle. I used the whole formula. So pretty much was like middle of the green in this one. I end up pushing it. Like, I didn't mean to, I just pushed it, and then it ended up 3 feet from the hole. I made birdie and ended up getting in the final group the next day. But that's because I didn't hit it perfect. If I would have pulled it, I still would have been on the green. If I hit it perfect at my target, I'd have 15, 18 feet, which is statistically where I should have been from that. Actually, probably been even better. And then I happened to push it, and I was right there. So you have to remember, you're going to push and pull shots. So if you can give yourself a little bit more clearance and stop aiming at tucked flags, you're hopefully just going to give yourself more opportunities.
So many kids, so many junior golfers, they go pin hunting, and it's not,
it's probably not fun. And it works like once out of 15 times.
Yeah, exactly. We're on with Michael Leonard, wicked smart golf, and he's not from Boston, but he does love the
Wicked
Boston.
smart. You got to get that accent next time we do this
Wicked
interview.
smart golf.
There we go.
I spent some time in Boston when I was in the military, so
okay.
we used to learn to park a car at the yard. And
yeah, you got to pack the car at the Harvard yard. Thanks for your service as well, by the way. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Michael. You also have a podcast. We talked about your books. We talked about how people can get in touch with you from a mental coaching perspective. But talk to us about your podcast. How's that going?
It's great, man. I just love it. Today is episode 380, which is wild.
I'm just a baby compared to you. Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, how many of you made?
This is season 3, episode 3.
Well, I mean, so how many episodes would you say that is?
We're about 20 episodes in right now.
You're already ahead of like 85% of podcasts. You realize that most podcasts never even get to 10. So
people give up.
They just
like
quit.
Golf.
Yeah. It's just golf. Like golf and business are the exact same thing. Like it's just about perseverance and not giving up. And so for me, I just love the podcast because in the beginning years, I just shared a lot of my own journeys and stuff just because I had a lot of pent up knowledge I wanted to share. And I was playing a lot of tournament golf and would take players through my journeys, the highs and the lows. And then I started getting some more guests on, and now it's almost all guests. I do like 1 or 2 solo episodes a month. But yeah, I just love talking to players, coaches, mental experts, authors, my coaching students and players that have used my resources and got to a really good level. So yeah, I love talking about golf, writing about it, as you can tell, kind of obsessed with the game. But despite having 380 episodes, I still feel like we're just getting started.
I love it. I love it. Before we let you go, I got one more question. I want to talk a little bit about, you talked about seeing the leaderboard and then coming back for day 2 of a tournament. A lot of times we'll see junior golfers that have a lot of success on day 1 of a tournament. And there is a different feeling when you come back and you're in that final pairing, or on the flip side, maybe you didn't have your best stuff on day 1, but you can get better on day 2. What are the different approaches they should have to come into day 2 and still give it everything they have?
Yeah, I think the first thing is like always just let's do a recap after the first day before we get to the next day. So every day after a tournament, I do a quick recap. I'll log my stats and make sure and go through, because a lot of times you're like, oh, I hit the driver really good. And then you do the stats and you're like, oh, actually that was like the worst part of my game. So I think objectively versus subjectively is really key. Don't like stress over the stats, but it's like my ritual. So I come home, I log the stats, takes 10 minutes, and then I do a mental recap. So there's something stats are just never going to capture. How did you feel that day? What was your mental, like, did you feel like you got good sleep? Were you mentally there? And then start to learn from it. So let's say you did play really good. Okay, how did you play so good? Did you have a certain thing you did for your warm-up? Were you focused on routines? Were you talking to playing partners? If you hit a bad shot, or when you hit a bad shot, because of course you did, what did you do? Did you get mad? Did you bounce back? What was the self-talk? Did you have a mantra you used? I tell everyone to create your peak performance checklist. You have to figure out what it is that you do to play your best golf, because my golf is your golf for someone else. It's different. Some players are introverted, so they don't need to talk to players. Some players are extroverted and they need to talk. Like there's so many intricacies to it. So ask yourself, what did I do today? And how can I do that again tomorrow? So I think that's the first thing, and document the good shots and really think about those. You don't really need to worry about the bad ones. Your mind already has a really good way of remembering all the bad, negative things you've done. And that's just programmed in us. So we have to make sure to remember the good stuff to hopefully reinforce it. And then the next day, you got to go out there and stick to the game plan, stick to the routine. I think that leaderboard lurking is a terrible idea. We're not good enough to dictate, I need to make birdie and win. Like if it was that easy, of course you would. And so I have found personally, I mean, unless you're like, on the cut line and there's a par 5 on the last hole and you might need to go for it or else you're going home for the weekend. I think for the most part, when I look at my best tournament rounds, or even when I won a tournament a couple years ago, I didn't even know where I was. I finished it. Then I went to the leaderboard. It's like, oh, I won. Like, yeah, it was like kind of anticlimactic, but it was pretty cool to get the trophy and the winnings and stuff. But it comes down to, because when you're worried about the leaderboard, you're into the future. And so the only way you play your best golf is if you're here and now, if you're in the present moment. And so if you're, beating yourself up for that 3-putt that happened earlier, or if you're getting anxious about the 18th hole because there's water down the left side and you hit it down there before, then you're getting in that future, and then you're just not going to play your best golf. So to me, it comes down to just controlling what you can, knowing how you play your best golf, sticking to your routines, and enjoying it. Pressure, there's that quote, pressure's a privilege. Like you worked hard to get here. And like, I got the chills just thinking that, because like, there's so many times we get there and then we get that, let's not lose it. Let's not screw it up mentality. And that's a failing formula. If you go out there to play not to lose versus play to win, not like you have to fire at every flag or anything, but like play your best. Give it your best.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't go as well, you can sleep good at night. When your head hits a pillow, you're like, I gave it my all today. It wasn't as good, or maybe it was, but you can at least know you gave it your 100% effort. But yeah, trying to guard a lead or not screw up is a terrible formula because you got tension and you're just not going to play your best golf. So that's again where it comes back to knowing your game.
Yeah, and I love that so much. It's giving it everything you have, mentally, physically, emotionally, right? So that when you go to sleep at night, whether you finish 1st, 5th, or 15th, you did your best that day. We are on with Michael Leonard, host of the Wicked Smart Golf podcast, author of Wicked Smart Golf 2. Speaking of the books, how can people get their hands on the books, especially our junior golfers and parents of junior golfers, so they can try to learn how they can lower their scores?
Yeah, definitely. So it's all on Amazon and Audible. Pretty much all formats out there. The Audible has a little bit more content in terms of like bonus. I do some mental golf coaching questions and answers in there, but yeah, everything's Amazon and Audible. And then those are pushed out to like Apple Books and other stuff like that. But yeah, pretty much you can look for all the links as well on my website, but hopefully players can use it to enjoy the game more and really tap into their true potential.
Michael, really appreciate you joining the GSD Golf Podcast. Before we let you go, any last bit of wisdom you want to drop on a junior golf or a 14, 15, 16-year-old that's just trying to get a little bit better?
Just keep going. That's the number one thing that I would tell you. I actually just put this image together of myself when I was 14 years old versus now. And I want everyone to remember, and I actually literally just gave myself this kind of collage here. So that's what I looked like when I was 14 and now. And so I said, just keep going, make your younger self proud. So it's going to feel like it's a journey. It's a battle out there. And it feels like everyone's better than you, or you're never going to be good enough. So just compare yourself to where you were yesterday, last week, last month, last year. Just tunnel vision. How can I get better? How can I get better? How can I get better? Instead of saying, wow, that guy hits it so much further than me. Wow, she's so much more composed than me. Focus on you. Everyone's journey is going to be different. Some players are just going to be really good right out of the gate. Some players are going to have to work towards it. But I never would have imagined at 14 years old when I was shooting 124 that a few short years later, I shot 74 in my first tournament, 50 shot improvement. But that just came down to just not giving up and just to keep going. Yeah. And so that's why I stress that with everyone. It's a solo journey. It's you versus you. But if you just keep going, you're going to impress yourself.
Michael, thank you so much for joining the GSD Golf Podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it too. Keep up the good work.
Michael Leonard, Wicked Smart Golf. I'm trying to not say it with the Boston accent now. Thank you for joining the GSD Golf Podcast, dropping all kinds of knowledge on us. You can follow Michael on Instagram. Go download his book, listen to his podcast. So much information on ways that you can lower your scores, develop a stronger mental game, and be better prepared for tournament play. As always, we're learning to get shit done on the golf course. We're going to do it together. We're going to get a little bit better. We're going to make the golfing season during 2025 just that much